On today's Locked On Texan podcast, waiver wire and the AFC South landscapes. A great man once said a change gonna come, so we're gonna talk about how that change has finally came for the AFC South. Cody, it's Wednesday. We're back. Start the countdown.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of the Locked On Texan podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team in the Houston Texans every day. I'm John, some sports guy Hickman, joined by Sports Illustrated, Cody Davis, here to discuss a couple of important news to start off the day with the Houston Texans, new players, and we got to mention, I know you guys are tired and don't want to hear about the Deshaun Watson news or whatever.
But it's important. It's important.
It's important, and it does affect the Houston Texans. And so I want to start off today with the Houston Texans signed cornerback Kendall Sheffield, claimed on waiver wire. He is from the Houston area, played out in Marshall and Fort Wayne area. Shout out to Mo City. Spent one season at Blinn Junior College after he left Alabama before transferring to Ohio State. In college, his best year coming in his final year in 2018, where he totaled 35 total tackles, 2 for a loss, 6 pass deflections, and 2 interceptions. Drafted in the 4th round by the Falcons in 2019. And so far in his career, Sheffield has primarily been a special teamer. Also, the Houston Texans signed wide receiver Connor Weddington. Now, there's a couple of pros and cons with this player here. Pros: played with Davis Mills and Stanford, ran a 4.4 40, has good hands and speed, and averaged nearly 28 yards per kick return during his career. Cons: not a lot of playing time in the NFL so far, did not find the end zone much in college, only has 1 TD in 4 years, and he also needs help as a route runner and winning against man coverage. And so right now what the Houston Texans are doing, they're bringing in guys, claiming guys, signing guys in order to make sure that they are filling out this roster very well, making sure that if they need players on the practice squad to eventually step up, they have players that they have built trust with and some playing time with. I just think right now they are at a position where they are really wanting, Cody and listeners out there, to have a competitive offseason so they can really find out who will be the best of the best. Of course, we know you got to fill 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, right? Then the 12th man is your stadium in the NRG. But there's a lot of things that go into the roster. Situational players, third and long, third and short players, right? When you look at end zone coverages and how you want to play that with the red zone. Special teams, kick return, punt return. All of these are very important, and Houston is just doing their due diligence on making sure they have the best guys available for their roster.
Yeah, and John, this is part of the reason why that a couple weeks ago when we talked about the possibility of the Houston Texans, quote unquote, tanking isn't going to work, because like I mentioned, with them hiring Lovie Smith, with them giving Davis Mills an opportunity to go out there and showcase what he can do, with them keeping Laramie Tunsil, with them keeping Cooks, it's showcasing that this is a team that actually want to go out there and actually compete. And we're going to talk about why in the next segment, because of the whole AFC South is starting to shift. And then last segment, we're going to close out with talking about the possibility, a small chance that they just might be good enough just at least to put themselves in a position to compete for the playoffs, more so a wild card spot than anything. But John, listeners and viewers, this also goes to kudos to Nick Caserio, because this is a guy who knows, he understands where the Houston Texans was when he got here. Not only did they have to deal with the foolishness and the shenanigans of Deshaun Watson, they had a terrible roster, a roster that went 4-12 prior to him getting here, and now you are starting to see him putting together a team that is going to be at least manageable to where they can get that 12th man, because John, listeners and viewers, they didn't have a 12th man.
Bad. It was bad last
inside
season.
NRG Stadium last season. But speaking of what Nick Caserio had to go through last season, on yesterday, Josea Anderson of CBS Sports, she reported that the NFL, they will send investigators down to Texas. They didn't say Houston in general, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be in Houston. But they're going to have an opportunity to meet with Deshaun Watson, do their own investigation, and determine whether or not they're going to suspend him, how long his suspension is going to be for the upcoming season. Why is that important? Because there was a report that came out on Monday. We did not have an opportunity to discuss this, but on Monday, a report came out that said that the NFL was trying their hardest to push Browns and Texans back as far as possible until towards the end of the 2022 season. And it makes a lot of sense because this is actually going to be the third season in a row that the Houston Texans had an opportunity to play against the Browns. The last 2 years, it was in Cleveland. If you remember, I think in 2020, they played against the Browns in week 5. And of course, last year, as we all know, because that's the game Tyrod Taylor, we got the same old Tyrod Taylor. Week 2, they had an opportunity to play against the Browns. So it seemed like every time they played against the Browns, when you go back and take a look at past schedules, it's always earlier in the season. But for some reason, all of a sudden, the Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns, they're going to face off, as we all know, week 13 inside NRG Stadium. John, that is important news because not only does that let us know that, there is a possibility that Deshaun Watson will be suspended for at least half the season, but that also means that he's going to be a lot healthier. He's going to find his stride, and he's going to be 100% by the time the Browns play the Texans inside NRG Stadium. So that might not be too good for the Texans. What you like to say? You prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Yeah, but I will say this: if there is no Deshaun, if he's suspended, and there is no Deshaun for a certain amount of the season. And which, by the way, the NFL, shouldn't have this been done already?
You would think. But like I mentioned, because they already knew he was sitting out last year, and this is the NFL, sometimes when they act too fast, it's like that didn't make sense. Then sometimes when they act too slow, it's like you should have acted faster. So there was kind of in a lose-lose situation. I guess they probably just want to just wait and see until he was in a position where, okay, I want to go out there and play. And they're like, okay, now let's see what we got to do with this situation.
Well, in terms of the Houston Texans, this could actually be a good thing if he does get suspended. Remember, they do own the Cleveland Browns first-round pick for next season. And so let's say if he goes out there, he gets a 6-game suspension, which I think is the minimum suspension that somebody can get. They're suspended by the NFL the first time for certain offenses. If he goes out there and get a 6-game suspension, this game is in week 14. So if he goes out there and gets whatever amount, that does help the Houston Texans because Deshaun Watson would be the arguably best player on their roster if you're not including Myles Garrett. I think, you can go back and forth between him and Myles Garrett, and some people may side with Myles Garrett, and I totally understand. But at that quarterback position, he is undoubtedly the most important, and if he's not on that field, we can see a version of the Cleveland Browns that we saw last year where they were winning games, well, they were losing games, maybe they were supposed to win. I'm sorry. And so we know Baker Mayfield won't play for him this year. That relationship has soured and sailed. They did sign
Jacoby Brissett.
They signed Brissett in the offseason. I don't think Brissett is a quarterback as respected as he is that can go out there and go undefeated for a certain amount of games. And so that could possibly help the Houston Texans in the long run. But as a fan of the game, and I hate to say this because it does go against my morals, but I would like to see Deshaun Watson play in the NRG because I feel like that is a game where in return of everything that he did to the city of Houston, karma, I think karma will happen that day. Cody, I've been waiting to do this. I don't want to do this. A new birthday cake. Bill Bar. Let me tell you guys something. Okay. This is actually really good. There's only been a couple of Bill Bar flavors that I've enjoyed. But this new birthday cake, I just got it in the mail, right? and I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Imagine dipping your finger into a plastic tub of birthday cake frosting, then opening your eyes and realizing that was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. And that's what it's like when you eat one of these Built Bar Puff birthday cakes, man. You can see it's already gone on. I've been eating this and snacking on it on the slick since we first started. I love it. And with only 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, only 9 grams of sugar, this limited time flavor is amazing. An option for you if you're looking to be more healthier, get that flavor and variety in your day. You cannot beat this at all. Oh my goodness, this is good. So go to Build.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. You can go ahead and you go ahead and get one of these. Treat yourself. Don't cheat yourself. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans viewers and listeners out there. You know, I kind of hinted at the beginning of the show that a great man once said a change going to come. And if y'all know who I'm talking about, then maybe you ain't a fan of this new Texan era team led by Lovie Smith. Because if I said that, I know he would probably sit back, rub his beard, and say, you know, Sam Cook was a bad boy.
He really was.
Because he was. But the landscape of the AFC South has slightly changed, right? And I think for the good and for the worse for a couple of teams. Now, before we dive into how this affects the Houston Texans, let's talk about a little bit of the changes that have been made so far. Starting with not the Houston Texans, the Houston Titans, right? But the Tennessee Titans, they drafted Malik Willis and Treylon Burks. They also traded for Robert Woods, which is a move that happened this offseason that I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention to how good of a receiver Robert Woods can be for that team. The coach trades Carson Wentz to the Washington Commanders, trade for Matt Ryan, and they also traded for Yannick Ngakoue. The Jaguars, they no longer have Urban Meyer, so that's a plus. Doug Peterson is their new head coach, well-respected Doug Peterson. They upgraded their pass-catching corps with Christian Kirks, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram. Signed linebacker Foy Oluokun, and who also led the NFL in tackles last season with the Atlanta Falcons. And so when you look at the Texans, yeah, they got a little bit better with blocking. Drafted Kenyon Green, also got AJ McCann. Went out there and drafted Derek Stingley in the later in the rounds. You went out there and drafted John Mechie. You were able to do a couple of things this offseason in terms of getting a more respectable head coach, getting an OC, promoting Pep Hamilton to OC, who everybody is very excited for. The anticipation around his first season is at an all-time high. I haven't seen that energy for the Houston Texans for an OC in a very long time, if ever. So the AFC South soundtrack, the AFC South has done a 180. It may look completely different from last season. And if we're looking at what the Houston Texans are possibly going up against, the number one team I want to look at is still the team that won the division in the Tennessee Titans. And in prior years, in the past 2 to 3 years, your number one concern if you were the Houston Texans playing that team was Derrick Henry. This is why I wanted to talk about how the landscape can possibly look different for the AFC South this year. Since 2017, Derrick Henry's career broken missed tackle percentages per year goes from 23.3, 23.7, 21.5, 15.1. Last year, 9.6 per game that season. Now, one thing about Derrick Henry is his game is centered around bruising, taking punishment, giving punishment. And when I look at his broken tackles per year percentage go down and now under 10% at 9.6, to me, this screams that the Tennessee Titans will have a decision to make this year. Remember, they lost Deontay Foreman. He's gone. They did sign Hassan Haskins in the 4th round. They drafted him in the 4th round this season. But they're going to have to make a decision at whether or not or when they're going to put Malik Willis out there on that field if the season is salvageable or not, and if it's time to go ahead and make that change. Because with Ryan Tannehill, we've seen his ceiling with a healthy Derrick Henry. We've seen his ceiling, when there is no Derrick Henry and you really have to entrust him, Cody, with that offense. And when I look at the injuries to Derrick Henry, how I think his game is going to be changed because his body may finally be catching up with him, and I'm not hoping this or wishing this upon him. I'm just looking at the facts of when he played 100% healthy. When he came back from an injury, Derrick Henry was noticeably different and not as good or explosive. The landscape of that Tennessee Titan team is so different because if you go out there and midway through the season, if Ryan Tannehill is not getting it done, then they are going to put Malik Willis out there with a Treylon Burks, with a Robert Woods, and how much can you really expect from that team to be explosive, to be as dangerous, to be as good as they were in the previous years when a healthy Derrick Henry was running the ball? Now compared to a Derrick Henry, nobody's 100% sure he's going to be able to bounce back fully from those last couple of injuries. Putting their rookie quarterback out there in an AFC South that's a whole lot different and better because now the next best team presumably will be the Indianapolis Colts under Matt Ryan. So in total, and this is something that Cody and I, along with our Locked On AFC hosts and colleagues, will dive into throughout the offseason, maybe in the month of July when training camp starts. But to wrap it up, Cody, this is an AFC South that doesn't have a clear-cut dominant team because a lot of the dominant players like a Derrick Henry, well, we're unsure about him. The Indianapolis Colts, how much does Matt Ryan have in the tank, and will he be a significant upgrade over Carson Wentz? I think he will. We'll wait and see. And then when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're in a position where there's so much new going on. We haven't really seen a lot of teams be able to be that competitive or be the best of the best of their division where they're trying to figure out a lot of different things on the fly. So for the Texans, they are in a good spot. They also have a lot of good new pieces, which makes them right in the middle of the thick of things of new, that trend. I just want to see how this landscape changes and how they'll be able to compete going up against teams that they're trying to figure it out just like them.
And it's funny that you mentioned the Indianapolis Colts because, John, that is the one team I want to highlight. And I get it, I understand it. There might be a little bit more uncertainty surrounding the Tennessee Titans. However, when you take a look at Treylon Burks, when you take a look at Malik Willis, I do believe that's going to be enough to keep the Tennessee Titans as the best team in this division. However, in terms of the Indianapolis Colts, let me be the first one to say this. I do believe that Matt Ryan is better than Carson Wentz. I believed it yesterday, I believe it today, and I'm going to believe it tomorrow. However, when you take a look at the overall production of this team, a team that finished 9-8 and a team that missed the playoffs by a game because they got demolished by the Jacksonville Jaguars last season, I'm not too sure if Matt Ryan is going to be enough to get this team back to where they want to be. And I only say that because Matt Ryan is 37 years old. And at some point, Father Time will start showing itself. And two, and most importantly, you're looking at a situation where Ryan is asked to revamp his game, learn a whole new offensive game plan in Indianapolis when he basically been in the same system in Atlanta for over the last, 14, 15 years. And John, I understand it, and I know you love this stat of how much better Matt Ryan will be when he has a damn good run game. Of course, the biggest example, Atlanta Falcons, when they went to the Super Bowl in 2016, unfortunately, their run game did not help them bring a Super Bowl because they ran into the GOAT. But that's another story for another day. But John, even with him being paired with Jonathan Taylor, I still do not think that's going to be enough for the Colts to get back to being arguably the second best or the best team in this division, especially when you're considering that in Jacksonville, here in the city of Houston, these are two franchises that have been at the bottom of the NFL pit for so long to the point they are eager to overtake one of these teams. And I think the Colts might be a little bit more vulnerable than the Titans.
The Colts?
That's the way I see it.
Well, but so the thing is, if we're looking and if we're staying with the theme of the landscape, the Titans at this time are still the best team on paper in this division. I think the changes can come from Indy, Houston, and Jacksonville. However, when I talk about the Titans, if they are the big fish in the pond and they have these question marks surrounding them, I think teams have kind of figured them out on top of Derrick Henry's injury. Ryan Tannehill, he is who he is, right? And you trade A.J. Brown, a polished and established receiver, for Treylon Burke, who you drafted out of USC. What are we going to get out of Treylon Burke in the NFL, right? And so that's a question mark. The question mark surrounding Ryan Tannehill, which is an answer at this point, and the question mark surrounding Derrick Henry, those are three question marks that there's no definitive answer that's positive. That's why I would look at that team as they may have a little, a chink in their armor that NFL teams are able to find out, figure it out, and attack that to where we know that your quarterback isn't going to be able to respond if this isn't happening in the backfield with him, and there's not a stud wide receiver that we have to truly game plan for game in to game out whenever you play you guys in our division. That's a big question mark. And so I think that's why. But again, we'll talk about a lot of these things throughout the offseason when we get our colleagues over Locked On Jags, Locked On Colts, Locked On Titans. That's always going to be fun to continue that trend throughout the season as well. So we'll get more into it. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, the news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to the playoffs, esports, and much more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Texans your first listen every day. Now make Locked On NFL your second listen. The schedule is out. Teams are preparing for who they got to play. Fans are going crazy. And the NFL never stops. Neither does Locked On NFL. Get insight, opinions from hosts including Ross Jackson, Chris Carter, and Tony Wiggins, plus local Locked On NFL hosts repping all 32 squads. There's no offseason for real fans, so make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of Locked On Texans. And before we close out, we still want to play around with the schedule. And John, unlike last year, I think we all can agree that we are expecting the Houston Texans to win more games, especially me. Last Thursday, when the schedule came out, my way too early prediction was the fact that I know it wasn't Super Bowl, but it was that, there is a possibility that the Houston Texans can finish off the 2022 season with a record of 10-7. Now, look, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, viewers, John, do I believe 10-7 is going to be where the Houston Texans stand at the end of the season? No, I do not. However, when I take a look at this schedule, I just can't help but say that the Houston Texans have so many toss-up games that can actually work out in their favor. When I take a look at the Colts, Jags, and Titans, we just talked about the AFC South changing. We know those are three teams that the Texans play 2 times a year. I think at least every single one of those games, especially the ones inside NRG Stadium, because I am expecting the Texans to have a better home atmosphere this year. The games where the Texans play the AFC South counterparts inside NRG Stadium, I think that's a toss-up. And then when I take a look at outside of the division, when I take a look at the Eagles, the Giants, the Commanders, the Dolphins, those are other toss-up games that can actually work out in the Texans' favor. So literally, John, I just counted off, 7 to 8 games that I can truly see the Texans winning. Once again, It's a toss-up. It could go either way. Do I actually expect the Texans to win all of these toss-up games? No, I do not. But I just can't help myself and just think about the improvements that we're seeing from guys like Nico Collins, Davis Mills, Roy Lopez, whatever the case might be, in terms of the great talent that they was able to get in the draft. And there's just a whole new atmosphere, a whole new vibe, a whole new coaching staff. I just feel, in my opinion at least, that the Texans will be in a better position to win these toss-up games, unlike last year.
And you have the Texans making the playoffs.
I mean, of course, based off of 10-7, I do. I think they have a shot, though. That's what I think. Cause like I just mentioned, all these toss-up games, I could see them the last week of the regular season. Of course, this all depends on development, how fast rookies can catch on. Of course, coaching. I just think there's a slim chance if everything goes right for the Houston Texans, like it seems to be over the last couple months. And see, look how you're looking at me. This is why I hate way too early predictions. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the Giants, the Commanders, Miami, they're all saying the same thing. It's a toss-up, but we're going to win. You don't think there's not even the slimmest chance? And by the way, this is a fan base. This is a fan base where we had to address a couple weeks ago. They are not about to be the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to throw that out there.
Do I think there's a slight chance? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do think there's a slight chance. I mean, I also think there's a slight chance I dunk again. I also think there's a slight chance I win the lottery. I think there's a slight chance I may get a date with Beyonce. But the reality of it is, all of those are slight chances. And so the thing is, we really have to wait until the preseason to see what type of players and what progression and the coaching and the developments. Right now in May, do I think they're going to make the playoffs? No, not at all. Not at all. For the Bengals, they had drafted Joe Burrow the year prior, and he was damn good. And they also had they had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd before they drafted Jamar Chase. So they already had two very good wide receivers and Joe Mixon. Right? So, they already had firepower. We got to see what Nico does. We got to see what Mills does. As much as we like Mills here on the show. We got to see if Brandon Cook still got it. I think he does. Got to see if John Metchie can be what we think he can be. Right? That's a lot of question marks compared to people who said, well, the Bengals did it, which I was one of those people because I do think there's a slight chance. But they already had concrete good players on their roster. And they had Joe Burrow, arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest college quarterback, single-season college quarterback of all time. So, no, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't even want to draw this on and give you why. I just don't.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's not going to happen right now. So that's just me.
Shout
out to my boy Chat. He's a former Texan fan, and he's like many others who have been putting in applications to find new franchises to roll with because they just got off the bandwagon. So, Chad, if you're listening to this show, if you made it to this point, shout out to you, man. The Patriots always got room.
Oh, whatever. But look, at the end of the day, as we sit here on May 18, 2022, I think the Texans come week 18. Was it week 18 now? Yeah. 17? Whatever the case might be. That extra week is still throwing me off. But the last week of the regular season, I do believe we could be looking at a possibility. We'd be one of those teams. If X team and B team loses and the Texans win this game, they will make the playoffs as a wild card spot. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there right now. Because I believe in this coaching staff. I believe in the players. And I believe in this new culture.
Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.